Good. Okay.
All right. Hey, everyone. Thank you for taking the time to honor yourself, to receive information about how you can, I like to use the words with my branding, which is stand, speak, shine. I believe we're kind of entering this age of feminine empowerment that's been unlike any other in our history. I've traveled all over the world. I've met and looked in the eyes of pretty much every ethnicity of women and all socioeconomic backgrounds, education levels. And one thing that I find as a constant is that this whole core, I want to say issue, but it's collective and it's individual. But this whole core belief around feeling less than. And so for me, I honestly have had this lifelong pursuit of how to understand that for myself, because we always operate, when you have a desire to have influence, it's usually because you have some kind of crisis or wound within yourself that you really want to wrap your head around and you really want to heal, and therefore you are just compelled to then share that with other people. And that's where I've always been in my life. My background is in psychology and in working really, really focused on women's issues and especially mothers. So with that, we're going to talk about that wound a little bit, but we're not going to focus on that wound because you know how it works. When you talk about a problem, it gets bigger and bigger and bigger. That's why I don't always believe that traditional talk therapy and psychoanalysis is going to help heal our world, because really we need to be solution focused, but we also need to get real. So before I dive into this collective wound we have as women, that we're never feeling enough, we're never feeling like we're doing enough, we're never feeling like we're being enough, it really is a crisis of self-love. That's what we're talking about. There's also this thing that I've learned, and I actually learned this really powerfully through a man named Nithya Shanti, and he is a man that, he was a Buddhist monk from the age of 16 to 22, and he was a forest monk. So he lived in this forest with all these other monks, and they depended on the village for their food. They literally had no attachments to materialism. So everything that they received, they were dependent on the village around them. The villagers around them would go out and leave food by the wayside so they could eat every day. And everything was through nature and what was put before them. And they literally meditated 8 hours a day. So the reason that they meditated 8 hours a day is not so that they could raise their own consciousness. They did it as a service to mankind so that they could lift the vibration and frequency of the whole world. And he is of the opinion that because a lot of these people that get really, they're called frequency holders. They may not be in the spotlight and they may not be out there sharing and teaching and having physical presence. But what they do energetically and what they do spiritually is help to lift and transcend the consciousness of what we currently have. So whatever's happening with women right now, and whatever's happening to the collective consciousness of women, is really also very tied into other people who are helping to raise this collective limitation that we've had as women and the injustices that we've suffered. So one of the things he taught me is this thing called spiritual bypassing. By the way, he's still really young. He's only like 34, I want to say. I've had the privilege of working with him in person, and then we've done some Zoom calls together. But he said, there's this thing called spiritual bypassing. And spiritual bypassing is this, okay? We are human beings having we're spiritual and human beings, right? But we largely operate through energy and emotion and feelings and intuition and whatever. So there's that side of us in our subconscious. There's also this other side of us that just is out there, and it's an ego, and it's physicality. He said sometimes we want so desperately to up-level spiritually that when we have a negative thought or a negative emotion or a crisis or a wound or something surfacing in our humanness, we feel that in order to be spiritual, we have to bypass that negativity or get rid of it or gloss over it and do something spiritual. Now you might be saying, well, how is that spiritual, to bypass negativity, isn't that spiritual? Isn't it a spiritual path? And isn't it a spiritual, isn't it, are you less spiritual if you kind of, just don't tap it out or don't get rid of that negativity? And what he has taught me is that is what women are doing. When we feel anger, we feel less spiritual, so we stuff it. When we feel inferior, rather than be transparent and let that work in us until we can receive enlightenment for that inferiority, we bypass it or stuff it and think it's only us, and we don't allow ourselves the humility of transparency. And really what that means is vulnerability. We have such soft hearts and we have so much to give and so much love in us that we build walls around that, and we're afraid to open that up to let others be part of our experience in our humanness. It's not about commiserating. It's not about complaining. It is about being real and taking what they call in the 12 steps an honest, fearless, moral inventory of our lives. When we do that, we don't bypass over everything. We, from an emotional standpoint, let it express, look at it, hold it, take it out of ourselves so that we don't identify with it, and say, and we examine it. And as soon as we examine it, we can then release it, let it go, look at it, honor it, and then it is removed from us. So the reason I bring that up is because when I'm not going to be this like guru person standing before you and saying, oh, just love yourself. Because each and every one of us have built these bricks around our hearts and around our tender souls that have shielded us from really feeling and expressing life. Some of it is fear, some of it is anger, some of it is pride, some of it is envy, some of it is selfishness. Some of it is sadness, grief. There's so many blocks that we build up and bricks that we build up. So in order to heal this crisis, in order for it to move through us, and in order for us to look at it and examine it without shame, I might add, the sooner we can move forward and find joy. So one of the other things that I have learned, I've lost a sister to depression through suicide. She was a mother of 5 children. I've lost an aunt the same way. She left behind her 3-year-old for my parents to raise in her suicide letter. I've pretty much lost in every generation on both sides of my, both my mother and father's side. I've lost a relative, and usually it's a woman, a mother, in every generation that we know about. So this has been a crisis. It's been something that I've looked at my own children going, hey, this cycle stops here. And what is it? What really is it? Because I know it's not just depression. There's a lot of people who are depressed that don't exit life. But there are a lot of people who are depressed and who are functioning, but they are dead inside. And therefore, their physical body may be here, but from a soul level, they've disconnected from Earth. And to me, that's just as tragic. For me, it compels me to want to reach into the hearts and souls of women and saying there's more, and there's healing, and there's hope. So I've had my own struggle with this, huge struggle with this. And for me, it hasn't showed up. I have 2 sisters with bipolar. One of them, obviously, I talked about, who committed suicide. I currently have a brother. I have 3 sisters and 3 brothers. A sister a year older with bipolar, a sister 2 years younger. The one 2 years younger with bipolar is the one who took her life. Then I have a brother who is in his 40s who is struggling with alcoholism and hit his rock bottom about 6 months ago and just celebrated his 6-month sobriety. I have another brother that has severe anxiety disorder, quite debilitating. He's working through that. My sister Robin and I are really the only 2 of the 7 children who've kind of escaped a real severe mental illness. So yeah, this has just shown up. I mean, all you have to do when you look at your desires and what you want to how you want to help people and how you want to show up for people, big or small, holding your microphone or just in the walls of your home. You have to look at the experiences the divine has given you throughout your life, because those have rendered you an expert in exactly what you are here to teach and heal. And most of the people that I attract and most of the people I meet these days are the chain breakers. We are the women who are saying, you know what? I don't want to do it this way anymore. I want to be happy. I want to feel free. I want to release the shame. So for me, it's just been this huge life journey. And my struggle may not have been bipolar, but it's certainly, I've had seasons of melancholia and cyclical depression. And really it's revolved around that life wound I'm telling you about, which is what the collective feminine deals with right now, which is feelings of less than and feeling disempowered. I don't have a husband who disempowers me. I don't have that going on in my family or anything like that. It's me. It's me who doesn't give myself that permission. So allow me to take you through something that I think will set you on the course for being able to wake up, because that's the first step. How often do we walk around asleep to our power? How often do we walk around feeling like success, freedom, and joy are for other people? How often do we walk around in comparison mode feeling that, why can't I get it together? And why can she? And what we do is we take traits that we admire in a variety and a smattering of women, and we create this composite female. And in our minds, that's who we want to be. And that is so dangerous. But it is natural for us to do, because we do in our hearts want everything. We want it all. And we feel guilty that we want it all. But what we at the core actually want is to give and receive love. The first and most important realization to make in your process of awakening is that the most important thing that you can do in this life is to love yourself. Now, what does that mean? Well, let me give you some context for those of you who might be struggling from a religious standpoint. Because there is so much shame that's perpetuated with religious programming. Spirituality has not got the component of fear with it. So I love my religion, but I also realize that there's some cultural programming that's fear-based. And so I have to detach from that and recognize that my creator is the one who I need to align with to understand that, the truths that I'm being presented with. So when biblically in Matthew 22, a young man walked up to Jesus and he said, "What is the greatest commandment?" You see, then they were in doing mode, right? They want to understand, the Pharisees and Sadducees and all the Jewish cultures. They wanted to understand exactly what they needed to do. And they felt like if they did everything on this list and they did everything they were supposed to do, that they would be accepted by God and they would be spiritual. So Jesus' answer to him is something I've built my whole paradigm on. And that is, his answer was about love. But he gave a priority. He gave a template, if you will, for happiness. He said to this man, you need to love. You need to love God with all your heart, all your soul, and all your mind, which is why I called my presentation, Loving Yourself, Heart, Soul, and Mind. But he said, that's the first thing. He's like, you literally need to hang everything on that. Hang all the law and the prophets and everything that you've ever been taught and told to this point, hang it on that, loving God. He said, the second's like it, you have to love other people. You have to love your neighbor. But he also said, as yourself. And I think that has become misconstrued. I think that we thought, okay, love God and then people and then yourself. But what Christ was actually teaching was that it should be understood, it should be a given that you're going to love yourself. And I'm here to propose to you that if you truly climbed in to love the divine and you understood how to get still enough to receive the love of God and give it back to God, you would automatically love yourself because the divine is already in you. What's happening with women is we've been told we don't, and this has happened through the ages. There was even a period of time where women were told they had to go to clergy to find God, or they had to attach to church to find God, or they had to go through another person or a program or an institution to find God. And God is already inside. So it's just a matter of accessing that. A part of God lives in us. And many people define God in a number of ways. But what Jesus was teaching is, hey, align with that and everything falls into place. You don't have to worry about all these commandments or worry about others, because that is the most important thing, is to love God. So it's a divine order, and I like to share this divine order: God, self, family, humanity, earth. The five priorities of divine order: to love God, to love yourself, then your family, then humanity or others. And it's really interesting because when I'm in alignment and I'm receiving the love of God and I'm getting still and it's flowing to me, it naturally aligns my life in divine order because I answer the call of what is in front of me. When I'm authentically lined up with the stream, I call it, of the love of God, I then can naturally have these beautiful feelings for myself, and I'm empowered to give to my family where my heart truly is, with my 5 children and husband. And I'm also aligned then to lead humanity in the charge and calling I feel that I've been given, and that is to empower women. So just know, receiving the stream is how you actually live from love. Receiving is how you learn to love yourself, not through giving. Giving is an extension of what you have first received. When you experience burnout, it means one thing: you have not filled your reserves with light. You have robbed Peter to pay Paul, to the extent where you have burned out because you are operating on your own reserves and you haven't allowed yourself the time and space to fill so you can fill others. Sometimes it's just as simple as, like, I like to think of it as a visual where I'm receiving through my mind and heart. It's filling me up with this reservoir of clarity, love, perspective, peace. And then I just picture it kind of like coming straight through me and shooting out. Now, whether I'm speaking in front of a group of people or I'm in an African village like I was a few weeks ago, it's the same. Or when I'm with a struggling child in my bedroom at night and they're weeping with me, it's the same. So how do you receive that? First of all, it's a change in perspective. Part of your awakening is that, and it's a deep acceptance of, I literally cannot operate in my life without getting filled up. And if I know that, I will create a space every day, preferably in the morning, where I can receive. And I think where we get tripped up is it's going to be too hard, we're not going to do it right, or it's not going to work. And that is a lie, because it can literally be as simple as this: God. And then, I don't know if you guys heard my intro from Carmel, how I coached her I'm a former Mrs. Utah. I coached her for Mrs. Utah. When she came to me, she knew in her heart she needed to do this pageant. And I told her, I coach very differently from other coaches. I've coached a lot of women who ended up winning pageants, teens and women, Miss and Mrs. And there's one secret I give them, and that is beauty is light. So if you want to stand out as the most beautiful inside and out, we've got to teach you how to receive light, because that is beauty and that is a woman's strength. And so we did that. We cultivated that. And I told her, if you're going, I can't tell you how to access your power. Only God can teach you that. He knows your heart and your personality and your path. So I said, you have to carve out the space or I'm not going to work with you, as I tell everyone I work with. And she said, all right, what do I need to do? I only have, like, my husband gets up at 5, and I'm like, 4:00 in the morning, girl. You got to get up at 4:00 in the morning, and you've got to become a receiving vessel. I'm only using Carmel as an example because she's here. And that's what she did. And she soon messaged me and said, oh my gosh, I almost like, there's a faucet that's been turned on. And I'm talking about you. Your battery's low too. Okay. I said, literally, she's like, literally, I have to turn off the faucet. I'm receiving so much truth and light in this sacred hour that it's coming so fast. It's almost like I'm being barraged with truth and revelation and answers for my life and clarity. And it's almost too much. I'm like, that's what happens when you show up, when you make that divine appointment and you honor yourself enough to receive, you will literally become a magnet for truth. And it will come, and it will come fast. So she did end up winning the pageant, and she did end up being that light, and she did end up cultivating and standing out as that beauty. She still has it. So just know, God, even if you're not a religious person, your higher power, I hope you've come to realization that you are not the source of all knowing. Otherwise, you probably would be on another planet. We all lack. We're all empty, and we need to be filled. And we are not the source of whatever we get filled with. We are at the mercy of being filled with it before we can continue to progress and to grow, especially as moms. We need that. So carving out a space to receive. So what do? So do you just sit there and meditate and and I've never been proficient at meditation. And I think the word scares a lot of us off. So just know that all we're really talking about is stillness. The answers are always in the silence. The answers are always when you move away from your typical routine and the typical way that you do things, when you carve out and demonstrate physically, not just mentally and spiritually, but when you physically stop and you go to a space and you ask and you are in a receiving stance, that is when the power comes. That is when you are filled with love, and that is when you are given clarity. And I'm a note taker, and I like to write. So most of the clients I work with and the women that I work with, I have them do what I do, which is just to get a little notebook that's just a receiving notebook. And that's another physical manifestation of how you are moving literally your heaven and your earth to ground into physical answers, not just spiritual impressions, not just a nice little twinkling or a divine spark, as they call it, but you're literally going to be receiving something, and you've got a pen at the ready. Okay, tell me, God, what? What is my truth? What do I do? How do I feel? And then before even preparatory, to doing, preparatory to giving is receiving, preparatory to doing is being. If you do have the desire to have influence with other people, even and especially in your own home, children, I will say this, children are not hearing you, they're feeling you. I once heard the most amazing quote by, I think it's Naomi Fox. She's a sort of a prominent women's issues writer, and she said, girls whose mothers radiate self-acceptance are vaccinated with it. I got to go back. Women who radiate self-acceptance literally vaccinate their daughters against low self-esteem. It isn't how we're telling our children how to be. It isn't how we're giving them all these spiritual gems and wisdom, right? That's big, but it's more the resonation they feel, because people learn through resonation. So by filling yourself up, by taking that time to receive whatever it is in surrender mode, what you're doing is you're allowing a resonation to take place, so that when you leave that sacred space and you venture outside that door, for me it's my office, when you venture outside that door, you're now in a position to not absorb love, but radiate it. And so you then are a vessel of the divine. You then are now able for people to feel that as you speak to them, for people to feel you and feel that light whether you're on stage in a pageant or driving your kids through the carpool or at the grocery store or holding a microphone in front of thousands of people, it's the same. It's not how many people you reach. It's how you stay aligned in the present moment with what you received in your sacred time. Let me tell you 3 reasons why women avoid doing that. And the only reason I know why women avoid doing this is because it's the same reason that I avoid it. The first is they're afraid to get close to God. One of the reasons we're afraid to get close to the divine, even though we don't realize it's already in here, so there's no getting away from it, there's no way to separate from God. There really is no way. But the reason that we're afraid to jump into it or bask in it is because we don't feel worthy. So if that's you, you must ask. You must ask for that to be shown to you in its realness, remember, and take it out of you visually. Maybe you want to journal it, but you're going to actually put it under a microscope and you're not going to spiritually bypass it anymore. You're going to look at it and go, hey, is this true? And you're going to do the work around why you feel that you need to be separate from God or you're not worthy to be in that space to receive. Okay. Another reason women avoid this is it's one more thing to do. And the lie around that is, hey, I'm already so tired and bogged down. Just so you guys know a little bit of a picture of my life. I travel to a different country almost every month in my business. And I also have 5 kids, 3 of which, well, 2 are young adults that are still living in my home. One is a 16-year-old. And then we have a 12-year gap. And the divine decided to send us this really beautiful combination of very high need, 2 high need children that we've adopted through private means. And we could be here all day talking about that miracle, but they're 5 and 3, Eli and Emma. So I have preschoolers, a teenager, and young adults all under my roof. And so I'm 49, so I'm raising 2 young children in my late 40s. I also have 2 young adults trying to transition through the next phase of their lives and this teenager. And my avoidance tactic is I'm so tired and I've got so many demands. And so that's just one more thing for me to have to put on my schedule. But what I'm being shown is if I don't put that as my number 1 prayer in my schedule, receiving, being filled, opening and surrender, asking, examining. If I don't put that on my calendar, there's absolutely no way that I can do the rest of my life. So it's simple. It saves time. It saves energy because really we're all just energy. What we give and receive is in energy. It's through light. And so when we don't take that time and we're in resistance over it, we can't move forward. Also, another thing that I found as I've worked with women is they're afraid that when they do get close to the divine, that the divine is going to list all the things that they suck at. Hey, you didn't show up and do this. Hey, you're really bad at that. Hey, you need to change this. And I can tell you unequivocally that that's not how the divine operates. If that enters your space, it's from another source. The only thing that you're ever going to feel when you carve out divine space is something that will edify you and empower you. And it will give you the wherewithal that you need to continue forward. It will not draw you back. It will not make your soul retreat. It will expand your experience as a woman, as a wife, as a mom, and as a leader. So I guess my parting words to you are thus. You are enough. You are divinely held and protected no matter what you do, think, see, feel, hear, say, or even if you're completely entrenched in illegal activity. I don't care what you're doing. It doesn't matter. What matters is if you can make it a habit to honor yourself and your family. Frankly, this is a gift to other people more than is almost a gift to you. I will say that. They'll see a different person and you'll feel differently. And if you're having struggles with feeling love, if you're having struggles with giving love, this is the way that and only way really effectively to heal that wound and move forward and be a force that you want to be. I'm assuming if you're a part of this, that you want to be a force for good and you want to have influence. And this is the grand key, is giving and receiving that love. So that's about all I have. I don't know how we open this up to questions. It looks like we only have like 1 minute left. Sarah, I don't know how you want me to wrap this up, or if we want to, I guess we can just, yeah. There are some really good books out there, but, and I won't, bog you down with that. Some people are readers, some people aren't. But just remember that even when you leave that sacred space, you have to keep training yourself to receive. You're going to have moments in the day where you have to stop, surrender, and receive. So just make sure that if you get caught up in like, oh my gosh, like I'm not doing enough, and there's so much over here that's undone, it's an invitation from your soul and from God to stop, surrender, and receive. So you might have to do it several times a day, but it will be the absolute most beautiful gift you can give yourself. Now I'm going to just read one more quote. This is by one of my favorite teachers, Eckhart Tolle. And he said, the major key to solving the planetary crisis in this time in history is the fact that we must recognize that humanity has essentially developed a collective fear of our powers to create. And who better but women who have this amazing power to biologically create life? We now can have that same power to create anything that we desire in embryo form. It's there, it's inside us, it's in our divine template. So just learn to create a space for love, receive it, become empowered, and then you will naturally find your mode of creation that you're meant to gift humanity with on this earth. And that is all I have.